What the? Hello, everyone. This is Gamer1745, who is starting this episode up here with a rant. Also a glitch, and is glitching and is hanging. Not the game, me. I don't know what I should say here, people. Yeah, silence at the beginning of an episode is hugely successful. All YouTubers do it. Um, how ignorant are you people? I don't know. I don't know. Let me ask you this to both the live audience, and please answer this truthfully. I'm serious. Please answer this truthfully, live audience or later on. Do you know? Oh, and look, I know I've seen recent, and I don't know if these are just the idiots, the few idiot examples. I do know that there are people that think they should stop farming out there because if we farm too much, there'll be global warming and people will starve. How are they going to eat? Well, they're just going to get food from the grocery store. You don't need to farm for it. I'm serious. There are actually people out there. And other ridiculous things, but people watching. No, Ragar, I'm glitching here. I'm glitching. If you want to see battles, come back next time. Do you know that rain comes because primarily over the ocean, water gets sucked up into the sky, it forms into clouds, and then it goes, well, it could be over water, over land, and those clouds then rain down. Do you know that that's the cycle? So all the water that flows down from the mountains goes into the ocean, and then it goes out to sea, and then somewhere out at sea, it gets sucked up into the sky, and then it comes back over the land, and then falls back down over land. How many people knew that before I explained this in the most simplest terms I could? And I'm going to presume everybody here that's around that doesn't say I already knew that, I'm going to presume you didn't. So I just have to wonder how ignorant people are today. Okay, well, no one's replying to me, so either they've left or still waiting for the loop between streaming and seeing, and then people typing in "I knew that" or "Yeah, I know that" or "knew that" or whatever. But oh, well, Beamslam says it's basic knowledge. Okay, so Beamslam knew that. Don't know if Arno knew that or Ragar knew that or Lugo knew that, or on YouTube, or Kevin knew that. I mean, I'm calling you guys out, or Long Washboard if you're still around, or Yagashura. I mean, you can lie to me if you want. I knew the rain cycle since fourth grade. Okay, well, good. You knew that since fourth grade. Good. Rain from the sky. Rain from the sky was there since the Roman era. I think Ragar's bullshitting. Okay. Okay. So we have basically people know because this is what I'm glitching over here, people. Gamers glitching. 1942. Industrial fertilizer. Time to research. And I watched, and I would, if I was a parent of a child, any, male or female, I would require that child to watch a show called Connections. Okay. You all should watch at least the first series of Connections. I don't know where you would find it. It should be in every school. That's probably where I learned about it. The country and the industry that came up with industrial fertilizers, artificial fertilizers out of chemicals was, wait for it, Germany! In the latter part, second half, if you don't know what latter means, second half. Ah, yes, okay. Morales knows. Hello. Good. Franz Huber process. Yeah, okay. I didn't quite remember the Franz Huber, but yes. I do know that because before Germany came out with their industrialized fertilizer, there was a huge sort of gold rush, if we use the term, to come down to Chile, down the coast here, because there was like 12, 20-foot deep piles of bird shit on islands that the birds were literally landing on their own shit and walking around that would harden over time, because it's sort of kind of dry, but they're, ocean there, because it's right along the ocean there. So the rain wouldn't wash it away. And it'd build up enough, give enough time to build up. I'm not saying it never rained. I'm just saying it was dry enough that it would do so. And so before, in from I don't know, let's just throw in a year, 1800 to 1850 or something, they were coming down in ships and harvesting this fertilizer and taking it to the industrialized world because, hey, this was great fertilizer. It was this super most excellent fertilizer. Well, it was the Germans. I want to come over here. The Germans who came up with chemical fertilizers. And industrially so. Not just, a few guys in a, chemistry lab somewhere, but cranking this shit out of a factory. I believe one of them is ammonium nitrate or something like that. It also, hey, Admiral Teague, it also, it makes explosives too. Why do I have to research this? This is another thing that's glitching me. Okay, you have somebody out there who makes this modification, and they decide to put in industrial fertilizers. And they're supposedly modeling, I know this isn't a simulation, but they're modeling the realities of World War II. And they're going to put this into the game, and they're not going to, so they got enough research to know that there is such a thing as industrial fertilizers. And they're not going to do enough level of research to the most played country in the game. Germany is, from various, I know from various stats, is the most played country. That you're not going to research and know that Germany should start with this process. Now, you don't necessarily, and I don't know about a 3-point hitch for trailers or tractors if Germany had that at the beginning, and you don't have to give it because you can mod it so that you would still have to research the other things here, because Germany in 1936, tractors were really, I know this better in Britain, were really sort of new to Britain in the 1930s. Were rather new, like we think. Tractors, or for their mechanical plowing in Britain, they didn't use tractors because it was the Fordson tractors that were set up there. I think it's a subdivision of Henry Ford's company, but I'm not sure if Ford's son is connected with Ford. I'm right offhand. I know I've heard, but I don't remember. That was new. What they had been doing is for their mechanical plowing, because of the types of soil and whatnot, and getting bogged down because they hadn't built good tractors yet, is they'd have two sort of steam tractor things that would sit on sort of each, one would be on each side of the field, that would, with cables, run a plow back and forth between them as they moved along. So instead of like a tractor driving across the field, they go along, one to each side of an edge of a field, and the plow thing would go back and forth between them to plow on a cable like thing. And I know I'm not explaining it well because I don't know it very well. Has become saturated with non-military micromanagement that it should just become a turn-based game already. I hear you. That isn't entirely a bad idea, but I see this is is with Black Ice here. Are they overdoing the detail? Okay, so yeah, tractors, and again, I don't know Germany well. The U.S. again, and even through the Depression, but it's with World War I happening, and the with a lot of men, as well as men in the armies, as well as disruption. They were not only shipping weapons to Europe, they were shipping huge amounts of food to Europe. So food was in very high demand. So during World War I, a lot of farmers got a lot of income. I don't know if I want to say wealthy, but got a lot of income in and had all these great coming in. So they then take out a lot of loans based on the idea that food is going to continue to be in high demand, so value. But after World War I, partially because of the pandemic that happens, the influenza pandemic happens, that there's a crash, at least in America, for the value of food. And so it puts a huge number of farmers, into bankruptcy, if you will. And so that they were getting into, this is in, 1918 type era, we're starting to mechanize farming. So America is mechanizing farming there, and then those that survive and can during the Depression are doing so, and are starting to come back up, what is it, Chalmers and several other industrialized tractor manufacturers that are also doing all the add-ons to the tractor to harvest or plant or whatever. I've been doing some research on some of this, but I'm just not remembering the names right here. So they're in a mass sense, in a common sense, to do farming with a tractor instead of like a horse or some other ox or something drawing a plow or moving a wagon, because a tractor will tow the wagon or whatever. Um, so the America is leading, even in the later stages of the Depression, getting out of that with industrialization of farming, and it really does take off in World War II. So I don't know, it's not does Germany or Britain have the technology about tractors, but do they have it in place in an industrial scale to affect food, productivity? Well, Germany has that in spades at the start of this thing for farming. That is not a limitation. And you can easily mod the game to start with this thing already researched and still require you to research some of the other things down this. Because partially because I don't know if this research tree is unique to Germany. It may just, again, I have not looked at all the other nations, and I don't see a lot of too many specific things. This may be just a generic, like industrialized nation tree that, yeah, Britain and I don't know that Britain. I don't know. Again, it's God. But I don't. But I haven't even looked into it really. Did they have a common use of industrialized fertilizers? I did watch a thing really good on the wartime farm, and I would go a documentary, and that would probably tell me. It's like a 6-part documentary, 8-part documentary on Britain's wartime farm. They probably would have talked about it, because they go into a lot of detail there. America really doesn't have, to my knowledge, at least not at scale, chemical fertilizers. Again, we're talking scale. We're not talking does it exist, because we can look at the Dust Bowl and all of that that's caused by certain failures and dealing with stuff. So I don't really know. Again, I'm talking the 20s and the 30s, again, when we're talking the Depression era and whatnot. I don't know that they're using it. But Germany has been since during World War I, the main stress on Germany really, I would say, is food. We can talk a lot of stresses, but food. They're able to keep their soldiers well fed, but it means heavy rationing at home. So Germany is trying to make their farms as productive as possible, and level of fertilization will mean how much grain yield per acre or whatever, within that kind of thing. So let me go back up here and read some of the chat, and we'll get to playing here in a moment. But I'm just sort of, yes, huge deposits of nitrous and phosphorus. Germany developed because it was equally dirty and sucked up too many other resources. Okay. Okay. Is the reason no one continue making synthetic fuel for Germany because? Oh well, yeah. Okay. I'm going to get this wrong, Admiral Teague, in detail, but you'll get an illustration. I think it was something like $2 to $5 or some sort of a value around there per gallon of gasoline to make it from coal, the synthetic fuel. Realizing that I think gasoline at the time of World War II, before the start of World War II and rationing, was like a dime or a nickel a gallon or something like that. So it is very possible to do it. Germany, prior to the war, is actually setting up small, I'm talking like in 1936, 1935, small factories to produce synthetic fuel that is, going all the way from the coal to the gas pump to show that it can be done. It is really sort of 39, 40 that it is really ramping up. I mean, it's and they're pushing it. It is just extremely the cost per gallon is extremely high, and I don't know if it would be significantly cheaper today. The U.S., if it wished to, could easily switch over to the synthetic fuel type processes. Germany used two different processes because they had either brown coal or sort of black coal. I forget the names of the coal, but each of those two coals, one of the processes worked particularly well with that and not with the other. So they use two processes to process their coal. I believe we have the same types of coal. So we could produce all the gasoline we needed. It would just be much more expensive than oil if we ramped up our needs, and for a long time, because we have so much coal in the U.S. here. Okay, Chilean saltpeter was a strategic material in World War I. The Germans had to invent alternatives or starve faster. Yes, perhaps they meant improved in. Well, I don't know that there was any improvement. I just think we're looking at, again, how do I put this? For most of the nations on the planet in the 1930s, because this game starts in 36, there isn't the money there for the farmers to buy industrialized, chemical fertilizer. Okay, industrial fertilizers, however you want to term it. They're, whether in Asia, they just don't have the money. Often in places like Vietnam and parts of Japan, their, rice paddy fields are very rich soil. Okay, some parts of Asia are very rich soil. Some parts of Asia aren't. So that does matter. But either way, they don't have the ability to either build the manufacturing plants themselves or import it. Places like Canada and the U.S., we just have enough fertile fields at the time and food, just like I say, food prices crash. So the idea of buying fertilizer to put on your fields to then grow, have the and I'm not good at explaining the details, but have the year after year, because the old medieval crop rotation system was to keep your fields from exhausting them from need. So you can just let them go whatever, not foul, whatever the term, for a while, and especially if you grow certain clovers or whatever and plow them in, you'll actually rejuvenate the soil back. So America just had enough, the North American continent, Latin America, again, a lot of those places they were just so poor, they did not have industrialized farming, so they weren't going to be importing expensive things. So for a lot of nations, I don't know the Soviet Union. I would suspect not, because, hey, they starved a lot there. So I would expect that they don't have industrialized fertilizers. So for a lot of nations, this might be something that is new, because the idea is that per man hour of growing food, and harvesting it and processing it, if you can make, again, an acre of land that a person is working 30% more productive, you can probably make that 30% more productive, more grain on it, without a 30% increase in labor. Yeah, you fill up the bags of wheat, grain or something, so you may have to move a few more of those around a bit, but it's really not the main effort there. So you're more productive, because the main effort would be plowing and then harvesting, the field area, walking behind the horses or as driving the tractors around. So it becomes a war critical function to have better yields in food. Germany is dealing with this in World War I as a critical food situation there. Germany is being isolated after World War I and can't, because of hyperinflation and various things, they can't afford to import foods really from a lot of places. I mean, they do, but it varies, money exchange. I don't want to go into a whole nother lecture on that stuff. So that's what we're looking at there. So they're not importing food. So they have to domestically make food for their population. And so I know they're doing synthetic, industrialized fertilizers, during the Weimar era into the early Nazi era. Now, of course, with the Nazi era and then the actual war coming up, which makes food even more critical. I know this is going on. So this just, and if you go, well, no, gamer, it's just, it doesn't matter what it's called, gamer, like you were sort of saying, oh, what improved. It's just a way to have a tree and click these thingies. And no, this is supposed to model reality. Was there, Germany is doing this. Germany is already doing this. So again, like I say, Britain, America, yeah, okay. Australia or someplace. Australia is very dry. There's very limited farmland. It's more water-based limitations than fertile land, I think. But if you're farming the same field over and over and over and over, you'll exhaust it. So something like this would help out in Australia. Unless you can point to me, oh, hey, in 1942 or something, Germany did X, Y, or Z that was a super improvement that, farm resource output +1. Unless you can show me that somewhere in history, and I've watched every documentary that I sort of can, not read every book. There's huge numbers of books on World War II, but I've not seen it, including things dealing with Germany's in the food situation. Okay, yes, let me catch up with on the chat here. Because there are day turns too. Yeah, well, this is technically an hourly turn-based game. If you did not know that, it's just flows. It's designed to be played quickly, which is becoming impossible. Well, I play it like you would play Hearts of Iron 3, slowly anyway. So, sort of that. Okay, wow. Yeah, Admiralty. Yeah, you're saying $40 a gallon. Yeah, it was expensive, but when your nation is at war, you dump money into fuel. It's just a requirement, or you don't have a nation. They ended up not having a Nazi nation. We defeated it. Original design pauses for orders. Yeah, I don't do give the order the major order front. Yeah, so there was the whole the Formula movie starring George C. Scott that the Nazis had created some secret formula to make synthetic fuel. Well, during the 1970s, fuel shortage. Yeah, they didn't have a super wonder plan. They had a basic plan that worked. It was just expensive. Do you think the military industrial organization? Okay. What do you think of the military industrial organization in Arms Against Tyranny? I don't know because I've just been playing the Black Ice mod so much. Mauricio, and this is what I'm trying to learn how, because see, we have energy production. So if you notice with this series, and I know you want to get on to fighting Yugoslavia, but this series is looking at the new economy. So and again, I hate the state mechanic, but the slots, these are empty, unlocked slots. These are locked slots. Was sort of meant to cap off how many factories you could build in this game, but they've added back in energy here in this mod that you can see base thermal plants, hydro plants. Hydro would be dams, and so we've now added energy back in the game. And I'm currently using 83% of available electrical energy in these factories. And so numbers of slots become irrelevant for a lot of things. you will find for let me find one here. Like for radars, the max number in a state or whatever. There, some of these do have a max number of a resource in a state for a particular thing. So it's no longer the idea, how many factories can you build in Germany? It's now how many factories, along with other things, can you supply energy to back in the game. So we were looking at engine production, and now we're food rationing. So this is food was a point of failure in World War II. Meaning Britain almost starved. Germany has not enough food production. The Soviet Union in the 1930s, early 1930s, has to by starvation, kill off millions of Ukrainians. Wonder why they don't want to be ruled by Russia anymore. Because they took the Romanian food to feed the industrial complexes up in Moscow and whatnot, called the Holodomor. So food is a failure point in the war. I contend, and they looked at from some Goebbels diaries, and his talking about food problems as being some of the cause for the invasion of the Soviet Union, because hey, they've got lots of food out here. Again, if we sort of look at the resource map here, they've got lots of food out here, and so they want the food. Well, I contend that and Soviet Union was sending massive amounts of food as part of their commercial agreements to Germany. So the Soviet Union is sending food that they know that once they go to war with the Soviet Union, those shipments will stop, but they think they're going to capture enough in the and quick enough. I contend that yes, if all you have is a hammer, all problems look like a nail, that you want to hammer it down, is sort of the saying. I contend that they have so many men under arms that it's hurting their food production. So they use their army to go get more food instead of, in 1941, not so much disbanding necessarily, but say take 2/3 of all or many of the divisions of those soldiers and say, hey, you're going to go work on farms. You still, you give them German soldiers did have work clothes that were different than their uniforms. You go out and get their work clothes on, and they go do farms. And they did this a little bit, but go back and now you have to plan and set this up. You can't just magically harvest more food. You have to go plant and harvest. And Germany, of course, was using forced labor to do some farming. They also, like Britain, are drafting women. Britain drafts women in basically and I know this in a little more detail again from Wartime Farm, a really good look at Britain's home front in World War II. Basically, young women, I don't know exact ages, but in their 20s, unless they have a child, basically, and even then, they are required to work. They will be drafted. They can go get a job in a war industry. They can join the land girls. Those are basically women to go out to be farmers, including some of the land girls go into the forestry service to cut down trees. So they can do that. Or they can go into the military. And now it's sort of like you get to pick, unless you don't, and then we'll pick for you. And generally, they're not drafting them into the military. They're drafting them into, war industry work. in Britain. If you're able-bodied and whatnot, you generally are going to be by around, because it actually sort of increases as the war goes on, as they get things ramped up more and more. But by 43 or so, most of the women that are young women are compulsory doing war work of some sort. Could be all kinds of things. You go get a job, at, whether it's building aircraft or serving food to men and women who are building aircraft, in the cantina, for lunch. I mean, it's get a job that's helping the war move along is a requirement in Britain for women, basically. And similarly, as the war goes on, with Germany as well, they're doing that as well. There isn't for that in America. You can, as a woman, you can sit the war out if you have enough money and whatnot. You don't have to go get a job at doing anything. So yeah, let's go back up. Personally, I think it's MIAs. I'm tired of having design planes, ships, tanks. Yeah, I hear you. And so this mod is not for you, Mauricio. Germans never really mobilized women into. Oh no, they did. They did, Admiral Teague. Oh, they most assuredly did. There is the RAD. Prior to the war, not all men prior to the war had to go into the RAD, and the RAD is the Reich Arbeitsdienst, the National Labor or Work Force. Is what that means. And so generally, all children had to be in the Hitler Youth. All boys had to go into the RAD and then into the Army. Girls, as the war gets going on, they've all got to eventually go into the RAD after leaving the Hitler Youth. The RAD is more like the land girls than factory workers. They're more of out doing other labor kind of things. Yes, if you were pregnant or had a child, you could get out of that. But they were drafting you into the RAD. They were drafting them into factories as the war is going on. There is a lot of compulsory women use in Germany as the war is going on. Not at the beginning, but by the end, yes. It's total Krieg, total war. The women are brought into it. It is just not talked about as much. Yeah, well, you can mention. Well, everybody puts women into the army, just about. Um, the Americans have the WACs, the waves. Oh, I forget because the WACs are the Women's Air Corps or Women's Air Corps. The waves are the Navy. I forget what the Army calls theirs. Britain has similar. Now, for Britain and America, they're not put into combat roles. Germany has a massive program for women. They are doing a lot of clerical and because switchboards are not automated at this time period, so people have to make all those connections. Doing a lot of communication type roles. Also, they're the flak helpers, basically manning and helping man or woman, if you will, flak guns. So even if you're, pick your German city here. This is on the front lines because it's being bombed. So people, when we talked earlier a little bit about air raid levels and shelters and whatnot, but realize what you're doing is when you're being bombed, you're pointing a gun barrel up into the sky and firing it up into the sky, and the round goes up there and it explodes, hopefully if you're if you're trying to shoot at enemy aircraft. Hopefully, some of the exploding fragments hit an aircraft, but all the rest of those fragments, and definitely some of them are going to they're all going to come back down, and most will be dangerous. Some considerably will be very lethal if they hit you. So you're wearing a helmet to hope that it doesn't. If it hits you, it'll ping off the helmet. Now they wear rather thin helmets. They're not standard combat helmets, but some of the flak. And so of course the airplanes are coming over, dropping bombs on you while you're shooting up there. So you're sort of on the front line. There's a lot of women that are flak helpers, and later stages Hitler Youth Boys are flak helpers too. So they're in Germany. They're on the front line shooting at aircraft. So that's a combat role. It may not be actual frontline, but they're in a combat role. Britain, from the Battle of Britain, particularly in the early stages before it turned it into the bombing of London and the other cities, when they're striking at all those air bases. Well, there's a lot of women serving in the RAF, again, not as pilots or anything, but on those bases, they're helping with the whole communication net, because even though you have the chain home radars that are like spotting the aircraft coming across, they still want to get reports of, are they bombers? Are they fighters? What are their altitudes? Because they're not necessarily, because the radars, and they vary at times, how much information they're telling them. So they're getting some information, early by radar, but they're also getting radioed in reports. So all these women are out at bases, and they're also in lonely spots that aren't being attacked too. But they're all reporting, and so they're all in the lines of the Blitz, and they're not just, oh, the air base is under attack, let's go hide in a deep shelter. They're there until the attack starts, and then when the bombs are going off, sure, they're going to hasty shelters, but that's still something of a front lines of the air war. So women are doing that, and then yes, the Soviets definitely have mostly the Soviets are sex segregated units, meaning either all women kind of thing. That's mostly how they're doing it, and not a gender mixed forces. They're definitely doing that. The only combat woman general that I know of served in Manchukuo, sort of the Japanese puppet army. She was part Chinese, part Japanese, and she was a general, the only actual combat general in World War II. She basically really commanded a regiment sized unit, a couple of battalions of horsemen, but rather interesting. I'm forgetting her name, but rather interesting. She was also a spy and all kinds of very interesting life. I did for military service by committee. I was probably the only one who refused to enter the youth bullshit thing. Soviets put women in some combat. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there's like, if those of you who like this sort of melodic metal type music, you might check out Sabaton. I know some of you guys know the band. They have the song Night Witches, which are about the a group of a squadron or several squadrons, I don't know, but at least a squadron of outdated biplanes, Soviet biplanes that were useless in fighting during the day because they'd just be shot down, but they were still, obviously would fly. And so these women and these, they didn't have a covering on their aircraft, for the pilots, so that they could like go up there and then fly and like turn off their motors and listen and whatnot at night and fly. And they'd go after, work as night fighters, to go after bombers and whatnot at night. That's why they were called the Night Witches, the Soviets. So where like the American women pilots and the British women pilots were non-combat pilots, a few times they purposely did not let them or have them armed when they, the armed guns with bullets in them, when they were flying fighters around Britain, because they did not want them to get shot down. I think there were a couple lost because of enemy, if indirectly or directly because of enemy action, but they would ferry aircraft around, so you get them where they needed to go, kind of thing, and do a lot of that stuff around. And American women pilots, I do think there were some that were flying, they would fly to Greenland and Iceland and whatnot to ferry aircraft to Britain, and then either take a transport aircraft back or whatever to get a bunch of them back to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, I've read on. Yes, exactly, Admiral Teague. So yeah, so those were around. So the Soviets definitely had a lot of women in combat. Where you sort of get the mythology of Germany and women is from Nazi propaganda itself. There is, during the Weimar Republic, there are a lot of women not working in industry, like at a steel factory or at a tire factory somewhere. Well, in a clerical section at those factories, certainly, but not at the main, factory floor kind of work. But there were a lot of women working, and obviously there's women working on the farm if it's a family farm kind of thing. But there were a lot of, in Weimar Germany, a lot of women in the workforce. There's a lot of single women. They're like in France, particularly France and Germany, there are more women than men because they've had so many men killed during the war. I think this also holds true in Britain, but I know very much so in Germany and France. So many men are killed in the war where women aren't. So there's an overpopulation of women. So they don't have a traditional rolled husband to, go out and get the job and make the money for the family, and the woman stays home and works. So the Nazis come along and they want to see a population boom of Germans, not of other people, but of Germans. And so they very much encourage, through mostly social pressure as opposed to legal or force, to get women unnecessarily out of the workforce. That doesn't mean that they're banned. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't or they can't, but they try to get them. But it's never 100%. I mean, Hitler has a few female secretaries. They're all using. There's women throughout society in the workforce, but again, it's more clerical or shopkeeper or non-labor intensive type work. And they definitely move in the 1930s a lot more women out of that and into the homes. They're definitely, because this is one thing I know more from, this is turning not into a war game session, but into a sociological session. I know from my studies on Britain, financial consideration is the primary consideration if people are getting married historically in Britain. And I'm going to extrapolate this to other countries. But most of the time, people did not get married in Britain until the guy can support the family. So, and it was, in Britain, it was male inheritance. So generally, when the father died, the son inherits. So the son, let's say, and there's poor people out there that are just destitute that have common law marriages, absolutely. But sociologically, even if you're sort of middle class, which is small, but type, you get married when, say, you inherit the family concern, and then you're 30 years old. You get a wife who's, say, 20 years old. She dies at age 24 because of childbirth, so you get a second wife. And then when you get old enough, you can sort of see you can see this inheritance is a major factor. Now, of course, we can see starting in the 17th century, this sort of escape pressure of getting to the Americas. that people can go out and get jobs out, work out there and settle here. So I'm pretty damn sure that during Depression era Germany, which gets pretty damn dramatic, and I've just been reading about Albert Speer's life, actually listened to an audiobook, but doesn't make much of a difference. I'm talking about him getting married and whatnot. Now, he comes from a low-end wealthy family. Not from his sort of father makes a bunch of money being I think as a builder. More so, I think, a builder more so than an architect, meaning having a building company, not just as being a commissioned architect. Not from so not of like old money, but of sort of younger money. And so he's coming to that. So he gets married, but he has support financially from his family. Well, a lot of Germans men do not have good financial prospects until the Nazis come into power and get employment up. So that very much helps, I'm sure, marriage rates, which will then, of course, increase birth rates. And the Nazis are really trying to push this idea. So you get the idea that they are not taking advantage of things. But you have to, whenever you look at World War II for any of the nations, beginning, middle, and end, the conditions at the end are different than the conditions at the beginning. Even in the U.S., obviously Germany is, bombed to hell at the end, of the war. They're conquered. Even in America, various conditions are, beginning, middle, and end, and things change over time. So Germany definitely mobilizes, but Germany does not, I repeat, Germany does not fully war mobilize until you get the sort of the winter, or just after the winter of 41 to 42. So they are not fully mobilized for warfare. They don't start fully mobilizing, I should say, for warfare until into early 1942. They're trying to keep early on in the war, before France falls, Germans are afraid of another World War I. So Hitler and the Nazis are keeping a lot of civilian goods and civilian manufacturing going to keep the people satisfied, keep them from getting revolting, if you will. Then once France falls, well, hey, most of the war is over. You still have, some submarines and some bombing out in Britain, but mostly the war is over. And they actually slow down in production of war materials, partially because, hey, those are old model tanks. We're going to build new model tanks. Don't need to build outdated model tanks. Well, end up going to Barbarossa that only a few people knew that Barbarossa was in the works. And so they're actually reducing down productivity. And then, of course, the higher-ups in the Nazis think that this is going to be another short war into Russia, so we don't need to totally mobilize. And mobilize, I mean like getting every single factory doing something for the war effort, getting every single labor person doing something for the war effort. It's either 42 or 44. There's a decree that they're going to stop. Up until this point, there's horse racing going on, in Germany, where you have, like you think of a horse race, professional horse race going on. And this is going on all over Germany. So there's horse racing going on. And it's late 42 or 43, somewhere in there. There finally comes out a decree, and this is why I know about this, to shut down all horse racing and turn all of those horses over to the army. Well, where's Munich? No, that's Prague. Okay. Franken. Where's Munich? Munich is Oberbayern. Where? Why am I Franken? Nuremberg. Oh, here's Munich. Okay. Munich down here. Okay, yeah. Well, over. Yeah, okay, Munich. The guy in charge of horse racing down here is an SS guy, an Alta Kameraden, an old comrade. So it goes way back to the early days, back to the 20s. He's a fat guy. Christian Weber is his name. An odious, odious man. He has a little Hitler-type mustache, sort of a fat guy. He throws really cool parties, though. Odious people can, and I say odious as in throwing certain types of people out of their homes and confiscating those homes, if you know what I mean. And other odious stuff going on. But he's also the guy, and he's an SS guy, he's also the guy who's in charge of the SS riding schools to train horsemen for the SS and do this. But he's also runs the Brown Derby, which you get a brown ribbon for winning it, and an annual big sort of horse racing down in Munich. Coincides with a big Nazi party down there at that time. And a party is in, fun times. Down there. Well, he, because has connections, complains up to Hitler. Oh, well, we got to keep this going. So he gets a special exemption throughout the war to not turn over the horses from the stables for the horse racing here, and to continue the horse racing up until basically the end. And so, and even with that, you don't have full compliance to getting over to the war effort. So it's really sort of chaotic with Germany and the progress of getting into full war production. And it's an interesting tale. Okay, guys, I think we will end this episode, though the live stream is going to continue. I want to thank you all who made it this far. I hope you were entertained and maybe even informed by all my blathering on glitching on railway engines who shouldn't have engines, and Germany should have its fertilizers. It's just, I guess my point is, before I end up, is if you're adding a mechanic of food into the game, you want to research that enough to get something that is so basic that the one nation that should be known for, and if you open up any book and look at the history of industrialized fertilizers, again, I don't expect every World War II guy to know this stuff, but the person who should in charge of researching this should spend a few hours, not days, few hours, and should know this. That's my point. The person either, who's putting this in, before you add something like that, you should know this. Okay, thank you all. See you next time for more, yes, more Hearts of Iron.